but I'm honored to share a few observations from living there for 20 years. First of all, in terms of innovation and the definition of innovation at this conference, I'd like to propose that it must be purposeful and solve a real problem through a solution that has not been used before. It's not invention that we're talking about, or creativity. So in innovation talk, there are basically two aspects of innovation. One is new, one is useful. And China traditionally has been good at the useful part, not so good at the upfront new part, the invention aspect of innovation. Let's go here. I think it's also important to, just in terms of the context of China, it's really the stage for some of the world's leading architects and designers at the moment. This lady here, Zhang Xin, who was on 60 Minutes, some of you may have seen her a couple of months ago, said to me last week, she said, we don't have our own Zaha Hadid, but that hasn't stopped us inviting her to China. And in terms of Rem Koolhaas and Norman Foster and Herzog de Meuron, what's really interesting, if you look at this project here, this is actually Ma Yensong, who's actually the first Chinese designer to win an international project. This is in Mississauga. So the idea of China being the stage is not quite so simple, because also the Chinese are becoming the players on the stage, and it's not limited just to China. We're dealing with a new China and a new international that includes China. So I'd like to just start by asking, who here has been to China? Just raise your hand. Okay, and if you have been to China for business, not just on holiday, keep your hand up. Wow, that's a very educated audience. So I'll whiz through these first slides then in terms of a little bit of context. Those of you who've been to China have certainly seen that looking at any culture in terms of food tells us a lot about consumer choices. So when you see the Chinese going to the market, they spend a ton of time looking at every single sweet potato and cauliflower or cabbage and checking it out, really significantly checking it out. When you see Chinese in restaurants, you see them taking an inordinate amount of time to order their food, asking what fruit is in season, how did you clean this, how did you cook this? They're very discerning. And I come to North America or to Europe, and I often feel the difference there, because we are a culture here where we tend to do the 2 for 1, buy 5, get 2 free, all you can eat. We're not quite as discerning. And it's not therefore totally surprising that the Chinese are the world's largest buyer of luxury goods. They understand quality. Now, they may produce rubbish, but not for themselves. They produce the rubbish to send over here so it can fill our garages. Okay? And that's really important to understand. That quality of discernment is an important part of Chinese culture. A second background note about China is to look at the educational system to understand where we're at in China, and in terms of innovation, what the limits are and what the opportunities are. So I have 4 kids who've all been to Chinese schools at primary level, and they come home and tell me how they've been coloring by numbers in their art class, things that are right and wrong. The sky must be blue, even a certain kind of blue. I tell them, sky can be red, it can be yellow, gray, black, it can be swirly. And I'm told, Dad, if I don't color it in the way my teacher says, I'll get a fail in art. So the system itself tends not to be fantastically creative or encouraging of innovation at the basic educational level. And so it's not a surprise that China is very strong in producing engineers, not so strong traditionally in terms of producing artists. So it's not a good start for innovation. But that's good news for us here, who are coming from North America or Europe and thinking, where is our place in the Chinese story? And let's quickly go to this third element of the sort of background story to China. Why has LinkedIn not succeeded in China? Generally, my Chinese friends tell me because it demands far too much trust. So from 1963 to 1973, Chinese had a period called the Cultural Revolution, 10 years of chaos. During that 10 years, people were rewarded for telling against other people, husband against wife, brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor. There was a complete engineered collapse of trust. Now, fortunately, it's been enough years since then, we're beginning to see a level of trust emerging. But at a very fundamental level, the Chinese had a complete collapse, systematic collapse of any trust. And it was not so long ago many of us were alive at that time. So I'm going to tell you 3 stories now to help also with the China. To understand innovation in China. The first story is about Jennifer from Dragon Lace. Dragon Lace, a few years ago, was one of the biggest suppliers of polyester lace to Victoria's Secret. They went to trade shows, this lady and her husband, and although they stayed at the most expensive hotels in Saint-Germain in Paris, they were treated as cheap Chinese guys from some Chinese factory. You know, they were never treated with any kind of respect or dignity. And they thought, what's wrong with us? Why do we not get any kind of place at the table? So one day they were walking along the street at one of these trade shows. They saw a shop selling antique lace. They bought the lot and brought it back to China. They copied it. Then they found more efficient ways to increase quality and production. Now they're one of the world's largest suppliers of antique lace to Prada, Gucci, Miu Miu, Ralph Lauren. And so you're thinking, why is he telling a story about copying at a conference where we're supposed to be discussing innovation? Copying is obviously probably the lowest form of innovation, if it even makes it onto the scale. But this is not just a story of copying. This company now has a significant design team. They create 95 designs that go in the bin for every 5 that get accepted. They have expanded to now produce organic cotton lace. They also produce a lower range to sell to Banana Republic, to Ann Taylor, etc. And in the spirit of diversifying but staying organic, they're the biggest importer of Cocomat, which is coconut fiber mattresses. They are a force to be reckoned with. And what is interesting to me about this story is it's a real China innovation story. It may have started with copying, but it has really progressed in terms of design production and understanding the useful nature of innovation. So when I asked this owner about trust and intellectual property and copying, do you know what she said? She didn't talk about the Cultural Revolution. She said, no, Cultural Revolution is not the problem. She said, we do have a problem with trust. The biggest problem is being copied, not by our Chinese competitors stealing our designs, but from our foreign buyers who happily go down the street with our lace samples to try and get a cheaper price from the competitors. So the interesting thing about trust is not just a Chinese problem. So the next image I want to show is in terms of Asian technology. Homegrown Asian technology. Here we are in an environment, a culture which is addicted to phones and technology. People are constantly communicating. Here is Moxtra. I don't know, how many people in the room use Moxtra? No, it's a new technology, fantastic. So Moxtra was created by Stanley Huang, who's the CTO of Moxtra, which just won the top prize at Demo China for mobile internet category. He co-founded Moxtra with Subra Iyer, who is an Indian and the former founder and CEO of WebEx. How many people here know about WebEx or use WebEx? Great. So actually it's an Asian invention. It happens to have been sold to Cisco for $3.2 billion. But Moxtra can best be described as a mashup of Evernote, WebEx, and Facebook. And similar to that, here we've got WeChat. How many people here have heard of WeChat? 1 or 2 hands. That's really interesting. When I met with the strategic head of Cisco, the Cisco think tank for Asia, he described WeChat as the 5th great invention of China. So that puts it alongside gunpowder, paper making, printing. So WeChat, that most of us in the room haven't heard about, has plans to expand very significantly. It's a service that is essentially a mashup, like most Chinese innovation, of industry-leading applications: WhatsApp, FaceTime, Skype, Vine, Instagram, and the telephone itself. The true innovation here, with most of these Chinese technologies, is how seamlessly existing technologies are meshed into a new experience. It's a mainstay on Chinese phones. It has 190 million active users, and they have aspirations to take over this sector globally. Third part of this story, research and development, or what in China we often refer to as receive and duplicate. So there's strong government support for innovation. In 2007, Hu Jintao, who was president at that time, created a campaign for indigenous innovation. So as a result of this, there are financial incentives and endorsement, especially for R&D and the tech sector. So it has spawned a number of high-tech parks. Electronics high-tech park pharmaceutical high-tech park, chemical high-tech park, a medical high-tech park, to encourage environments of co-generation, but against the odds of the lack of trust. This is a huge growth area, and one of our competitors was telling me, he said, if you really want to see what's happening in terms of innovation in the workplace, forget the workplace. Come and see what's happening in the labs and the R&D facilities in these high-tech parks. It's not rocket science, but a lot of interior design firms are afraid of that. They assume it's too difficult, too complex, but actually that's a real boom area. So this is not Silicon Valley, however. Silicon Valley has horizontal structures, access to financiers, researchers, partners, suppliers, all creating an environment of collaboration. That horizontality doesn't exist in China. As a general rule, we have a very vertical system, politically very vertical, and as a result, people stay within that, and collaboration is a struggle. So I'm going to show a couple of projects here now. ABC Bank, Agricultural Bank of China. This is a project we're working on, the headquarters in Hangzhou. I think this is the reason I was invited to speak today. It's because Philip heard that we were creating an office for 3,000 workstations, and that included 3,000 beds. Because from 12:30 until 1:30 every day, they turn off the entire lights in the building and everyone goes to sleep. That's a Chinese tradition of xuxi, which is a rest in the afternoon. So this is their facility in Beijing at the headquarters, a pretty naff L-shaped workstation, which has a very cramped bed that pulls out. We've turned it into bench working, but everybody gets a 2-meter bed that pulls